until it gets to its full stage. In the meantime, I'm gonna get from in front of this. What I will note, it is still getting up to its high temperature, but what I will note is I do not have the case on, the fuel pump is running, and I also don't have the muffler on the exhaust. Actually, I don't even have the exhaust pipe attached because I was fiddling around getting everything done and just didn't put it back up here. Either way, doesn't matter. I'm gonna let this run for a spell. But again, all that to say, it is not that loud. So I imagine once the cover is back on, and you know, it may actually be a little louder with the cover on because it'll have something to tick against. But as of right now, it's not that loud. Don't have the muffler on the exhaust, and that is not loud either. So, yeah. I'm gonna let this run for a little while longer, and then I will cut it off and go through the setup, because I won't be running this in temperature mode because the controller will not be inside the van. It'll be on the external unit, so I'll just be running it off of Hertz or low to high versus to a set temperature. At some point, I may put extension cables on the controller to bring that inside, the same way I run the power from the inside. And then that way I can let it run off of temperature. So we'll see. I don't know if you can hear the pump cycling more as I up the temperature. All right. Also, red bar lit up, so we're almost. So what I was saying before I cut myself off was that we had the first red bar up, so we are running at almost its highest point. I will let that go for a little while because they say you should let it run at the highest for a spell when you first cut it on to burn off things, so we'll let that do that. But it is putting out some heat, tell you that. So I let it run for probably about 20-30 minutes. It is now going through its clear cycle. As you turn it off, it doesn't just cut off, it goes through this whole thing. So we'll see how long that goes. Okay, so it has finished its clean cycle. So I ran it for about 26 minutes. It barely sipped any fuel. Yeah, but it puts out a significant amount of heat, and I'm not sure how it sounds yet, but when I've watched videos, people always say, oh, the ticking sounds so loud in the video, but it's not that loud in person. With this cover off, it's really not loud at all. I got to see about putting the cover back on, and that may be part of the reason that there was damage to the fuel line, because see how that's sitting? I do not think there's a way to get that cover back on without crimping that tube. So what that means is that this project will be continuing because I may have to put it in a new box. We'll see. I'm going to try to get the cover back on and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so now we know the root cause of the tubing break to begin with. So the cover will slide over, but it will not tighten down with proper tubing in place. If I press that down, it's going to crimp that hose. So I'm going to have to put it in a new box. Stay tuned. All right, so here is everything pulled apart. That will be going into a new box. Alright, so here is the heater in the new box. That's where I have my 12 volt power going in. Got it going over to a 100 amp hour battery. The last time I ran this, I ran it using the 120 to 12 volt converter box. So this time I'm testing out my actual DC power connection. So I have the box vented on this side for intake air and combustion air, and just to maintain, prevent negative pressure inside the box. And then on this side, I have the heat output and the exhaust output. I do have the exhaust pipe that came with the original heater that I'm going to put on that exhaust output, just to pipe it a little bit further away in case there's any wind. And then that's where I'll connect the hose that I'll run over to the van. Yep, it's cranking out some heat. And I don't know if, I'll have to see when I watch the video, but it is very quiet. And this is without the muffler on the exhaust. And you can barely hear the tick of the fuel pump. Pretty happy with how this turned out. And now, with this kind of waterproof, I'm going to put some silicone, bead of silicone around all of the through holes. But yeah, I am happy with this. And this is what it looks like inside the box. I still need to mount the controller up to the side, but yeah. And as of right now, like I said, I have the box vented, so I'm pulling the intake air and the combustion air with the hoses inside the box. For right now, if it seems like I need to go out, I'll do that. Okay, so things that I have learned from this first test. Really, it's just one main thing, is that that hose gets pretty warm. I wouldn't say hot, but hot enough that I want to keep it separated off of the wall of the box. I don't think it'll melt it, but I don't want it to warp it either. So I probably will get some more material like what you see here, but just a little bit thinner, and affix it to the wall of the bin to get a little insulation from the heat from this tube. Now, what I have also learned in this is, because if this gets this hot in here, now I know there'll probably be some heat loss for the hose that'll run from this up into the van, but I don't want to risk any incidental heat contact for the hose that I plan to use to direct the air further or back to the sleeping compartment inside the van. So I'll need to get some insulation from that. But yeah, I am pretty happy with how this turned out. And so, while I would have loved to have just got a heater out of right of the box that worked, I now have one that is water resistant. So I'm not worried too much about inclement weather that may spring up overnight.